if the structure of the body could be organized and the mind could be organized, the rest of it will kind of look after itself. And I've always thought that therapy is much more about education than it is about treatment. Yeah, I mean, gravity's our friend.
If you take care of your body and you feel good in your body, a lot of times that is going to navigate into the other areas of life.
And you can't tell where's the middle. You can only tell where's your perception of the middle. Kettlebell lifting is accelerated standing practice. So wherever you can relax is the middle.
Hey, what's up, guys? Thank you for joining me and welcome to the show. It is a true blessing to be able to connect with the top minds in strength each and every week and share stories, insights, and experiences on becoming stronger in every area of our lives. And now I want to do more for you. I want to invite you to join the exclusive private Facebook group of The Strength Connection. In this group, I share the biggest takeaways and lessons from these amazing conversations, as well as training and strength tips for pursuing mastery and fulfillment in life. This group is filled with individuals looking to take full control over their strength in their lives, and it's the perfect space to explore ideas and share your journey. You'll also get exclusive access to the Strength Connection Mastery Seminars. It's a deep dive into physical, mental, and spiritual training that you can begin using immediately. Just go to the Facebook groups, type in the Strength Connection, and you'll be accepted immediately. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll catch you on the inside. Dr. Phil Greenfield, how are you, sir? Thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
It's great to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, I was saying I got a chance to connect with your partner, Maria, the other day, who is one of the most fun people to chat with all her ventures in the strength world. And she spoke so highly of you. So I've been excited for this for a while.
Great. Yeah, looking forward to it.
Yeah. So, I got a chance to dive into a lot of the work that you've done, from your experience in chiropractics into zero balancing, and then your book, Unraveling, which I'm sure we're going to dive into down the line. Some of the wording that you put in there, I think, is so vital and important, of letting go, surrendering into our own body, which I think we're going to get into from some of the ethereal stuff into the application and the practice. But to kick this off, if you could give just a brief bio of, who you are and how you got into this world of health that you've been doing now for decades and decades.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think I was always curious when I was a kid about people, particularly about the suffering of people. I don't know what it was, but, when I was at school, I had a real sense that kind of people didn't seem to treat each other very well. And it was something that really disturbed me. And I thought there was, even as a young lad, I was kind of bothered by the way that people related to each other. So there was always this interest in, surely it's best to be kind to each other. Surely that's the way the world works. Yeah. And it's not what I was seeing. So I became very interested in people in terms of how they related to each other. And I trained initially as a microbiologist, which I ended up working in the food industry, but I wasn't particularly interested in the work, and I got bored by the time I was about 28. What I really loved doing was martial arts. I was very much into martial arts and meditation.
Oh, okay.
And
what practice?
Initially Aikido, and then fairly traditional karate. And later in life, I got involved in the internal Chinese arts, Tai Chi and Bagua.
Oh, okay.
Which really, that track really informed me from the very external work to the more internal work. Mm-hmm. And I think all the way along, there was this interest of how the physical body related to the mind, how it related to the emotional self, how it related to behavior. And that was really my passion. But there's no careers in that world, unless you're Bruce Lee, or which I really was. And I was more of a philosopher than a fighter. But I did enjoy very much the sort of exploration of the body, the exploration of balance, particularly in relation to another person, and the kind of work in Tai Chi and Bagua was very much, about, how do you stay stable in the face of change? And that really was what inspired me to think about writing the book. It's like looking at this idea of resilience, looking at the idea of how we can kind of get from one end of life to the other without, falling through the cracks or off the edge, and how we might go about that. And it was one day when I was about 30, I cracked my head on a beam at home, hurt my neck, went to see a chiropractor, and I saw what he did, and it was like, that's it. That's what it's like. I could spend the rest of my life doing that. It was like one of those road to Damascus moments. So I engaged in training at the McTimoney Chiropractic School in Oxford in England, which was a 3-year course back then. Graduated in 92, set up a private practice in Derby in the UK. And that was that for the next 30 years. So I just never got bored with it. I'm still not bored with it. I've recently moved to Ireland, so I'm setting up a whole new practice again. So that's been a bit of an interesting challenge.
Oh, wow. What was it about that chiropractic that just hit you so quickly on there? I mean, from one session to see that clear vision of it is pretty powerful.
I think it was because after I'd had my session, I felt so different. You know, I actually got off the table and it was like, oh my God, you know, it's like, what just happened?
Right.
I felt grounded. I felt expanded. I felt clear. And I had no frame of reference for why what had just happened to me had created such an immediate change. And so it just set up a lot of questions. But in the ensuing days, you know, I just felt so good. I was thinking, this is great. You know, it's like people would love this. You know? Right. And it's like, and I'd like to do it. And it, I don't know, it just all fell into place, really.
Yeah. Were you searching for kind of the, like what your path was or kind of what you wanted to do during this time, or was it just very happenstance?
Oh, no. I mean, you know, I think from when I was about 20 years old, I'd been filled with existential angst, you know, whatever it was then, you know, it was some kind of spiritual search, I don't know, some desire to feel better, be better. And that had many strands to it. But I think it was the work that I was so frustrated with the fact that I wasn't enjoying my day to day. You know, I just wanted to enjoy my day to day and feel helpful. You know, feeling helpful for me was one of the big things. You know, it kind of harked back to what I'd seen at school when I just, you know, saw people were kind of so unhappy. Yes, I don't know what it was about me, but I really kind of soaked it in. And when I got the first opportunity to think that I could do something that would help make people happy, it's like, this is great.
Yeah.
It's like, why wouldn't you?
That's so great. Yeah, that's so interesting. It's, you know, so many of us were all thinking the same thing. You know, we have that existential angst. We're trying to search out for what is that thing that's going to bring us joy and bring us happiness. And it's so often we search so much to like mindset aspects and you know, maybe spiritual aspects or emotional things. And those are all important. I get that, but you really kind of found it in the body and like from a physical practice of it, which I think is so huge because like if you take care of your body and you feel good in your body, a lot of times that is going to navigate into the other areas of life.
Absolutely. And I had a real sense that, you know, all of these practices, whether they were physical practices like, you know, the kind of movements that are so classical in martial arts, you know, that are designed to help the body to move freely and in a more relaxed way. Meditation, you know, where there's a possibility of kind of getting the mind to organize itself in a different way. And in between those two, the emotions and the responses to life. And I had a real sense, you know, if the structure of the body could be organized and the mind could be organized, the rest of it will kind of look after itself. You know, you didn't have to tinker with every bit. You didn't have to sort out every little thing. All you had to do was to get the body organized in a way where it would become relaxed and move smoothly, which would then feed into the way that the mind was actually doing its thing and vice versa. So it was all very experimentative at the time, but the bottom line was that all these things I was doing was helping me feel better.
Right.
And in feeling better, I just followed the things that made me feel better.
Right. So you said, that's interesting. You said like getting the body organized. That's not a term that we use a lot. You know, we hear of, you know, balance and stuff like that, but I think balance is often misconstrued of what that actually means. Like we think that it's standing on one foot or so, but when you're saying organized in there of talking about like balance as you said, like, what do you mean by that?
I think it's one of the things, there's two things I think that are not, that's a huge mug.
This is my Batman mug.
Asked you for the whole hour. Sorry, distracted. That gravity exists and is constant for the one. and that the body has mass for the second thing, and the general structure of the body is very ungainly. I mean, have you ever tried to pick somebody up who's unconscious?
That dead weight.
You know, people are heavy. People are ungainly. Gravity is constantly there. And, you know, when we stand up and we dance around, it's like, it's a miracle. It's a miracle that the body can be that organized that in the face of that mass and in the face of that ungainly nature and gravity constantly doing what it does, that we can feel so light. You know, it's like, how is that possible? And when I started to get into the internal martial arts, and we started to look at some of their very foundational practices, like standing practice, you know, Zhanzhuang, where basically you're just standing for an hour or so, and attempting to find the place in the body where it's least effort to stand up.
Yeah. It's
just unbelievable as a practice.
Yeah.
And you learn so much so very quickly. But that gave me a sense of this word of like organization. It's like when we organize the structure of the body, particularly the skeleton and its alignment in the face of the gravitational force, we get lift. You know, we get buoyancy. And when that organization is not happening, when the alignment is off, then gravity starts to act on the structure in a different way, and more musculature is recruited to actually keep the body upright. So the question is like, where's the position where you need to use the least effort to get the job done?
Okay.
Whether it's sitting, standing, having a 24-kilo kettlebell above your head.
Yeah.
Okay. And this is what got me interested in kettlebells. Because when I met Maria and I saw what she did, I'm thinking, how the hell can somebody that small do that?
Right.
And do it for 10 minutes. And it's like, that's unbelievable. And that's why I decided I better start having a go at it, because I really wanted to understand what it was like to organize your body under those conditions.
Right.
For the whole thing to become as easy as it possibly can be, so you can do it for 10 minutes without destroying yourself. So that was it was a very geeky thing that got me into kettlebells, but it's the same thing that got me where chiropractic has brought me, because, you know, I've always thought that therapy is much more about education than it is about treatment. It's like, what are we, you know, my basic question in life is, what should I practice? You know, what should I practice that's going to do the job to give me the outcome I want? And when I'm, you know, working with people in pain, it's like the commonality with people in pain is a lot of tension in their bodies. That's the thing that you most often see. So how do we de-recruit musculature? By using the skeleton as a support structure.
Right.
Whether they're sitting, standing, walking, or lifting the kettlebell, or anything. You know, if we can get the skeleton involved in this and our awareness of the skeleton, we can start to de-recruit muscles. And when we de-recruit muscles and create more relaxation, then we get more fluid movement.
Right. That's so fascinating. You talked about the standing practice of it, because I had a experience. I was doing Sifu Singh's mind boxing program, which is like a Tai Chi based program of it, which is fantastic. It's great movement. It's great for the mind and the body. But one of the days is a standing practice where for about 20 minutes, you just stand in just one position. That was one of the most challenging things of the entire program, of just standing in one place and not shuffling your weight and, shifting around. And I realized, like, wow, like, because I'm moving all the time. I do a lot of physical practice and training, but just standing in one position, my alignment, I could feel the change in the adjustment of it. So how many of us are just in just regular things that we're doing, we're creating more resistance and tension just naturally from gravity. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, I mean, gravity's our friend. I've tried to kind of, in my own mind, boil this down to simple cues. And the closest thing I've come to the answer I'm after is what I call surrender without collapse.
Okay.
So we let gravity do its thing. We let the skeleton catch us. And if we're off, then we'll know we're off because we'll feel the tension in our bodies. When we're online, then it can start to relax. And this is what standing practice is so brilliant for, is to start to find the middle. And the middle isn't a static middle. I mean, there is no such thing as standing still. If you stand somebody on a force plate, where it can measure.
Right.
You'll see that the center of mass just wanders about all the time, which it should do. But the kind of autopilot of the body will bring it back towards the center, but it will never stop in the middle. It's always wandering. But if you get a situation, I mean, I used to do standing practice for years before I ever stood on a force plate. And I was like, oh, I'm really great at this. I've been practicing this for, I'm right in the middle. And anyway, my mate Gary Ward, who does a great system called Anatomy in Motion, you want to get him on, he's interesting. He put me on a force plate. And I said, what's it like? Because I was thinking, this is going to be smack in the middle. And I was loading most of my weight onto my right heel at the back.
Right.
In a big way. Because, you can't tell where's the middle. You can only tell where's your perception of the middle.
Right.
So where the middle is not where you think it is. So this is why rhythmic practice is useful.
Okay.
Because you're constantly going, I know where the left is, I know where the right is, I know where the front is, and I know where the back is.
Okay.
And the middle is somewhere between those.
Some between all of the, okay, yeah. So finding where the borders are allows you to kind of find that center.
Absolutely. And this is why I think loading the body up with kettlebells, particularly doing things like snatch, it really starts to get you to learn where the middle is. Because if you don't learn where the middle is doing that, you're going to burn out.
Right.
So it's almost like kettlebell lifting is accelerated standing practice. Right. It forces you to find the center.
That's so interesting. And I spoke about this with Maria and some other people I've talked about in GS, where with technique, it's like if your technique is off a little bit, if you're doing some short practice or so, okay, maybe you can get through it. But all of a sudden, if you're doing a 10-minute test and your technique is off even a little bit, you're going to feel it a lot quicker from there. It's kind of like, I know like a lot of marathon runners, it's the same thing. Like if your gait or the way that you move is off and you're using more effort than you need to in every step, all that accumulation of time is going to add up so quickly. So finding that balance and that posture in your skeleton, as you said, like surrender without collapse. I think that's such a beautiful line there. Because a lot of times you think like surrender, you just kind of let everything go. It's like, no, just kind of sitting into your body.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great way of putting it as well. Sitting into your body. Yeah. Because people talk about letting go all the time and they go, letting go of. But I'm thinking about, what are we letting go into? Because if we let go into the support of the skeleton, the muscles will relax. Not so much that we fall over, but to a point where we're just expending the minimum amount of muscular effort to do the job.
Right.
So for me, it's like, I don't think this is somewhere you get to and then you go, oh, the job is done. Right. This is a practice. This is something that I think about all the time. I mean, I'm a geek, so I do think about it all the time. But I encourage people to get in touch with their skeleton, because the skeleton is probably the unsung hero of the body, I always call it. Do you know you've got a skeleton? If I do a class, I'll often say to people, it's like, okay, hands up if you know you've got a skeleton. And of course people know they've got a skeleton because they've seen the pictures, but do you really know? Do you know experientially in kind of a participatory way? Do you know that you have a skeleton?
Right.
You only know you've got one if you've had a terrible accident and some bone has shot out the side of your head. Or if you can actually feel the presence of bone in your body. So, we can do that. We can say, yeah, I know there's bones in there. But when we're standing, how does the skeleton feel when you can really feel it? And this is what my martial arts teachers were always encouraging me to do, it's like, find the skeleton, find the place where you've got that reliable support and the place where you can actually create leverage from. Because,
right.
The bones don't completely support the weight of the body. The body is supported by columns of musculature and the abdomen. A lot of the body mass is taken through those structures, but the way the bones are gives a guide to how the whole thing moves into its next movement efficiently.
Right.
So it's a kind of a quest really for me, to say, how do you know you've got a skeleton?
That is it's an interesting question, because it's like, obviously, yes, we know, like we've seen pictures, we know it's in there, but you don't see it every day. Like you said, unless it's God forbid, a really horrific accident and you see your freaking bone popping out of your arm, from there. Yeah, it's like, you don't want that type of practice, but it is like of understanding that there is bones that align in a proper way in there. It's a strange thing actually to think of. I'm pretty introspective on this as well. But even thinking that of like, when you, like, even going back to the standing test, like, after just a couple minutes feeling, oh, wow, like, no, I'm feeling some issues in my hip going on here. Okay, I'm not in balance. I need to figure this out a little bit more. And that all comes from the skeleton.
Yeah. And it kind of, that's why I think standing practice was always cited by my instructors as being the fundamental practice, as well as breathing. Standing practice is the thing that you should be able to do regularly and do well, because it underpins everything.
Okay. Is there a specific like time frame, like for a standing practice? Like if somebody was going to test this to get their balance or put this into practice, like, is there a time frame that you use to kind of determine a specific, test or a framework?
Yeah. I think it's, I don't take it as an evaluatory thing, but as more of a sort of an experiential thing. Just to say to someone, like, do this, how's it feel? Do it again in a couple of days, how's it feel then? Do it for a bit longer, how does that feel? Start to explore movement within it, how does that feel? Because all of these things are starting to acclimatize people with the feeling of skeletal support. And once you get a sense of that, then you can start to notice how muscles will recruit and de-recruit.
Right.
Okay, so it's like, like you said, you're standing, you feel something in your hip and you move a little bit, and then all of a sudden it will go, like, okay, yeah, that must be more in the middle today. That's today's middle, because I can relax. So wherever you can relax is the middle. And then as time goes by, as all the other muscles start to adjust themselves for your new way of being, it's like somewhere different will be in the middle. So one standing practice on one day is never the same as the next day.
Gotcha. It's interesting because I come from a little bit of an FMS background. That's what I did mostly, of doing a lot of assessment-based work. Yeah. So I understand like how those compensations and pain leads over a long time of those little compensations over it. But it's almost like, do you think that it's like our muscles, they're compensating for that balance issue? So they're almost acting like a big brother, and that's when pain starts to come about. It's because things are being used not the way that they're supposed to over a long period of time. In your experience, is that kind of
pain,
how that happens?
Pain is a complex beast.
Right.
Anybody who's haunting the corridors of the pain science forums like I do will know that it's a complex beast, and it's not what we thought it was. Or rather, there's more to pain than we thought it was. The fundamentals of pain are still, nociception, the detection of noxious stimuli transmitted to the brain, which are then, experienced as pain if that nociception is sufficient. So when we damage tissues, definitely there's a possibility we get a pain experience. But even when, for my money, when tissues are strained, when muscle tension is high, then again, there's a possibility of nociceptive activity, which may end up as a pain experience. And we know that pain can be modulated by all sorts of things, psychosocial factors.
Right, exactly.
But if we come back to the body, and for my money, I'm going like, well, what can I actually change in the body? What have I actually got any leverage over? What can I do that's going to make a difference? Well, the main thing I do is relax. When I relax my muscles, a lot of good stuff happens on lots of levels. So there's relaxation that is what we've just been talking about. You might call positional relaxation. So,
Okay.
so if I sit here for any length of time, it's going to start to become uncomfortable because this is a lot of muscular work.
Right.
This is more muscular work than that.
Right.
And this is more muscular work.
Exactly.
Than that. So I'm always going for, like, I call it functional laziness. It's like, what is the minimum effort I can get away with to do what I need to do?
Right.
And that doesn't, like I say, that doesn't matter whether I'm lifting a kettlebell, because that's called technique, and that's getting me the outcomes that I want.
Right.
Or I'm just sitting on the chair talking to you. It's like, I don't want to be sitting on the chair talking to you like this. I want to be sitting on the chair talking to you like this.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And when you think about that tension magnified in every second of a person's day for 50 years, you know, what's the outcome going to be? It's kind of obvious.
Right. Yeah.
You know, it's like down with tension, down with tension.
Yeah.
I mean, we need some tension in the body. We need tension to do stuff and to stay upright. It's surrender without collapse, not surrender into a pool of jelly on the floor.
Yeah.
It's just surrender without collapse, because from here, now I can move, and I can move efficiently.
Right. And that's why I think so many people too, I've spoken with, and I've used this as well too, is your training, your physical training can feel like a meditative practice, because you're using effort, you're using tension, but you're doing it in a way where you're creating balance within your body. Yeah. And I'm just thinking, like, I've, done meditative practices before, and sitting like in a, crisscross applesauce or Indian style, however you say it, it's like, that personally for me does not feel very comfortable. Like, I have some hip issues, and it feels very often, I've tried to hold that position, but I'm focusing more on trying to get comfortable in my position versus actually a standing practice or doing some breath work in a standing position actually feels more comfortable. Like, my alignment feels better. I'm wondering how many people we force ourselves into these practices thinking this is what we need to do, and it might not be the best approach for you at that time.
Absolutely. I mean, when dogma overtakes, effectiveness, it's like, then you've got a problem. And you see that in all sorts of fields. It's like, some people will never do a flat foot squat. Anatomy.
Yeah.
Nothing to do with anything else, just the way their anatomical, their bony structure is set up. Some people will never do this yoga position. And so, a lot of people just tear themselves apart trying to force themselves to do things they'll never do. Mm-hmm. And yet, some things we can change slowly. My overhead with kettlebells, because I'm short across here, this is a big problem for me, particularly when I'm with heavier weights, because my elbow will go into a flex.
Yep.
Like I'm coming to snatch, and then it'll yank me. So it's taken me forever to sort this out. But, that's only one small part of what I'm doing. So that's okay. But I know it's changing because I've videoed myself over the years, and I can see that my overhead position is getting better. But it's probably going to take, 6 or 7 years for me to get to a place where that particular quirk isn't actually occurring. That's all right. I've got time, hopefully.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, it is. It's interesting. I remember doing some practice with heavy get-ups, and the difference of the bell size in there changes where your alignment is in the arm. And it's like, all of a sudden, it's like you just shifted a little bit, and all of a sudden everything's stacked completely over each other. It's like, okay, that feels perfect. You feel like you can hold that there for an hour versus where you were right before was like a minute. Yeah.
And can you actually then translate that back into just standing at the bus stop?
Yeah.
And go, no, I'm relaxed. Mm. And do you notice when you're going?
Right.
And it can be, this is, when we talk about relaxation, it's a whole rabbit hole, because we've got positional relaxation, where the structure of the body is organized such that muscles will de-recruit. But what about that underlying hum of tension throughout the body? Mm. It's like there, and you don't quite know it's there, because, you know what I mean? It's like, how do you start to notice that? This is where I think meditative processes really come into their own, because I've always thought there's two great medicines: movement and stillness. It's like stillness reveals things that movement doesn't. Movement reveals things that stillness doesn't. But I think unless you're engaged to some extent in both sides of that coin, you know, the yin and yang of it, I don't think you get the full benefit. Because if I want to learn to notice, I need to some extent, go into stillness. You know, I want to go, how does my, you know, heartbeat feel? You know, how does my diaphragm feel when I'm breathing?
Right.
Like, how does this underlying hum of muscular tension feel in my body? And can I then go,
yeah,
you know, because unless I've got a contrast, I can't do anything about it. You know, if I'm just stuck over here, I mean, this is what happened to me when I had my first chiropractic treatment. I was stuck over here.
Mm.
Life was just like this. And then I had a chiropractic treatment. It went, I was like, oh my God, I feel like this.
Right.
And it's like, what? You know, and it literally blew my mind. And I think this is one of the things that's most valuable about any kind of therapy or therapeutic encounter is when you get what I would call a contrast experience. You go in feeling one way and you come out and you're like, what?
Wow. Right.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
And then one of two things happens then. You either go, I need to go and have that for the rest of my life to feel like that. Or you go, how is that possible? You know, and also how can I make that happen myself?
Right. Yeah.
Because as a therapist, you know, chiropractic therapy of all sorts, you know, the old model was very much about fixing people, and it created a lot of dependency. You know, it's like 3 treatments a week for the next 6 months. Thank you.
Yeah.
Come on. You know, this is, you know, immediately I found that completely unethical.
Yeah.
So for me,
it's enabling. Yeah.
Yeah. It's always been about education for me. It's like, what can I offer to this person that they might be able to engage with that will help them to have more consistently the kind of experience that they've had from receiving the treatment, whether it's zero balancing or chiropractic or, you know, doing meditation. It's like, how can they get themselves empowered to be able to create those effects within their own body and mind without the need for anybody cueing them or instructing them?
Right.
And that's a process.
Yeah. Well, and I think the third piece of that too is that the people who are going in for that first session, you don't even realize how shitty you're feeling in that time until you actually get the right therapeutic practice for yourself and the right module. And now all of a sudden you feel amazing. Yeah. And then you're looking back and being like, oh my gosh, I've been living in this stuck position for so long and didn't even realize it because our brain's compensating for it. And then you're like, oh, wow. Like now you start to create some self-awareness of, well, I can actually trick myself into thinking I feel good when in reality, I'm so limited in what I can do.
Absolutely. And as you know, as I know, it's a journey. Yeah. You know, and it can be one of the longest journeys and most difficult journeys that you ever take.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I mean, I had one of those moments when I started doing strength training, because although I'd done a lot of martial arts, you know, and I'd been at that for years and years and years, I'd never done any strength training. I used to think that people who went to the gym were mad. You know, and particularly people who went to the gym 8 times a week, you know, they were really mad.
Yeah.
And it's like, this was all about distraction. You know, I've always been obsessed. Well, I was obsessed when I was young about the, you know, my inner world and looking at your inner world and looking inside and you know, digging deep and all that stuff.
Right.
Which was great. But I was kind of in there so often that I kind of neglected a lot of what was going on in the outer world to my detriment.
Yeah. Well, the 8-day-a-week people, I think, were still a little crazy in some ways. So
to an extent. But it's like when I started lifting kettlebells and doing strength training, it's like I felt fantastic.
Yeah.
And I feel better now at 61 than I felt when I was 20. And that is no word of a lie, because I feel more organized. And I don't just feel organized on that kind of limp noodle kind of feeling that I used to interpret what Tai Chi was about, which it isn't. Mm-hmm. But I used to think it was all, you know, it was all very soft and all very like that. But now I feel more solid. I feel more organized. I feel stronger, you know, and I feel clearer. So it's a different, it's the yang to all the yin I was doing for years.
I was going to say, I think there's the yin and yang approach to it. You need the relaxation and be able to surrender into your body and feel good in that position. At the same time, know how to recruit tension and build strength from that. And if you have a harmony of both of those together, then not only are you strong as shit, but you're living probably a lot happier life and just more energized throughout everything that you're doing.
I kind of came at it the wrong way around, really, because I think, classically the first half of life is very rah, and very sort of yang in its approach. And then a lot of people, if they don't come to that more internal place when they get older, I think a lot of people fall into a bit of a trouble there. To be able to let go of that need to achieve and all that stuff that they did when they were young. But I was, I was just one of the quiet ones when I was young, and I really liked that inner world. So I think I cultivated a lot of that softness, but it kind of made me feel okay, but it didn't make me feel complete. And it was only when I started strength training, I thought, oh, this is the bit I've been missing. So, I spoke to my younger self and went, there you go.
That's so interesting. My beginning of my career was more experience with people like yourselves who found strength training later in life after doing it. We had a big population in a gym I was working at of senior citizens. So, I mean, like older than you, but most people were starting at 50 years old, 55, and didn't really feel the need until it was almost a necessity to get in. And they felt the same thing all of a sudden. Those were the ones that I really found, specifically something like kettlebell training, where there's a technique, there's almost an artistic feel to it. It's not just, jumping on a machine and just lifting weights. Like they recognized the value of that more because they were more of a thinking based person, from there. So it's like that total body approach to it. And, not just to keep patting kettlebells on the back, as the best tool, but it is such a great tool for that because it requires that mental thought of it. You can't tune out and just watch TV on a treadmill. It's like you have to really be within that practice and really understand your body and the organization. I love that word that you use, the organization of the body.
Yeah, for sure. And I get the sense that it feeds into this stuff about, the vertical line, because I'm always intrigued to watch people out in the street, or sit in the shopping mall and just watch. Excuse me, we've got crazy dogs downstairs. I don't know if you can hear them. I think their owners, we've been babysitting some dogs, so I think their owners have just shown up to collect them.
No, it's all good. Yeah.
If you watch 100 people on the street, you'll see most people tend to lean forward. They're kind of front loaded into their feet. And if you imagine that as a default position when they're standing, it's likely that they're going to be over-recruiting a lot of musculature simply because they've got a very small lean forward. Okay, so one thing I often do with people right from the get-go is get them to explore where they're standing on their feet. Can they actually experience their heels? Can they experience the front of their feet? To feel how that feels and to note that it feels different. And then say, the middle is somewhere in the middle. And then to explore what it feels like on the left. And then to explore what it feels like on the right. And, even with just a simple exploration like that takes a couple of minutes, they'll go, I didn't realize it, but I spend all of my time leaning into the front of my feet.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that's the kind of stuff that you used to do. And it's like people have these very quick realizations. And for me, there's a big bit in terms of falls prevention in the elderly with regard to this. Because if you actually are standing, leaning into the front of your feet, you're already committing your weight. And then if you lift your foot, then you're going to basically be falling onto the next step and then falling onto the next step, rather than standing in the middle of your foot, taking your weight on one leg and then stepping out. Stepping out. Transfer, which keeps you in the back of your body. So if you're a front loader and you're doing this catching and falling, then you're going to be lifting your foot off the floor less far. So you're much more likely to catch your toe. And when you see elderly people who really have developed a forward lean and you watch them walk, you go, it's like, it would only take a little bit of a rough surface for them to fall over. So encouraging people to find the middle, and particularly to reclaim their heels when they're front loaders, I think is really important. And the lovely thing about, kettlebell swing, snatch, it's like if you're practicing keeping your feet plastered to the floor and letting all the work go on in the ankles and the hips,
Yeah.
it's like you start to learn how to use both ends of your foot really quickly. And so I think it has this wonderful neurological feedback that when you then stand up, you're much more likely to be in the middle.
That's so interesting. Just the practice of over putting yourself forward or back. My coach from bodyweight training and Strong First, Karen Smith, would have us do that as a warm up. We would come up on our toes and walk around for a minute. Then we'd walk on our heels. Then we'd walk on the insides and the outsides, and you go for a little stroll on each part of your foot.
Nice.
We were going into work like pistol squats. We were doing single leg squats and airborne lunge. So it's like finding that middle of your foot is so important for that. So in order to do that, you need to feel all the different areas first. That's the way to find that center.
I mean, your brain is doing, this is the miracle of the human body or animal bodies in general, is that they do all this stuff automatically.
Yeah.
At lightning speed. So if they've got a default pattern that's been ingrained like a front loading, it's like you won't realize that unless you go looking for it. So it's just going to be your pattern. So I think the whole thing about exploring every single option of every single angle, just for the crack, just for fun, whether or not it's actually got any therapeutic benefit, it's like, isn't that what we lose? When we get to be adults, we lose bits of our movement repertoire, lose the ability to squat, the ability to overhead reach. All these movements get lost in older people, and it's like this is such a travesty.
Right. Yeah. Well, and it's kind of like what you mentioned there. We have movement and stillness together, and so often, there's some, which is personally me, I'll go right to movement so quick because it feels good. I enjoy it, but that stillness aspect, this is almost an exercise of stillness, as you're mentioning, Phil, of just being in that position and feeling that little bit of connection on all sides and finding where that position is. And if you have that, then everything else, all your movement is going to feel so much better.
Absolutely. And I think that a lot of people in this modern world, God, this is going to sound like a cliche, but here we go. Like a kind of stillness-averse, going into stillness is tricky. Not just because, I was thinking stillness, you start to notice things, and I'm kind of aware that, maybe noticing things isn't the thing people want to do. Because
ignorance is bliss. Yes.
It's easier just to keep the wheel rolling, and so the scenery just goes past as you're moving. But when you stop, it's like, and then you go, okay, so this is what it looks like in here, which can be tricky. There's lots of layers to people that are, difficult to examine. And that's not to be underestimated, and also to be hugely respected. So when I used to think people were in the gym 8 days a week, and they were just distracting from all the stuff, it's like, it may have been true, but it's not something to be flippant about.
Right. Yeah. It's not universal. That's not just the one mission from there. It's interesting. I thought that for a long time, honestly, too. I was under the impression a few years back of, if you stopped, it means you're going backwards. It's not just so it's like if you're on a car, you're pulling over to the side of the road means you're actually in reverse. It's like, no, that's not the case. You just pulled over to the side of the road just to check under the hood and see what's going on. And there's a great book actually called Stillness is the Key by Ryan Holiday. I don't know if you ever read it, but he has some examples of that, of, famous people who go for walks or go into meditative practices of stillness. It doesn't just have to be sitting in one position, just breathing, trying to clear your mind. It could be a lot of different exercises that you can do to find that stillness.
And when you look at the Yin-Yang symbol, it's not like two semicircles, black and white.
Yes.
It follows, it's dynamic. And when that expands into the 5 element system that they use in Chinese acupuncture, that's based on the seasons. I mean, there's nothing we can do better than to look at the seasons to know how to live our lives. We have high summer, where everything's, and then we have the depths of winter where everything's just stop.
Right.
And in between all those grey shades, as things start to grow, as the potential comes up and bursts, and then the fruit and the dying off, and then all the decay, and then we're back to the seeds, and it's like, that's life. So to actually deny stillness as a factor of being alive it just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Well, and that's a fact of surrender right there, right? With nature. It's like, the trees aren't trying to, hold on to their roots when winter comes. It's like, no, they know they're going to die off and then they'll regrow and come back in the beginning. And that was one of the lines that you mentioned in your book about like the body whispering, like, just go with it. I thought that was such a fascinating line of that, surrender from there. So can you tell me a little bit about kind of what led you to write this book? Like, what was the motivation behind putting this book together?
The cue came from a client, actually, because like I said, I'd always considered education to be the big deal. So I'd always tried to give people stuff that I thought might be useful for them, and somebody said to me, you want to write this down, because this is kind of good stuff, and just, write, do some leaflets or something. So I sat at my computer one day and just started to get some kind of chapter headings together. And I started to get this sense of something that I'd always had a belief in, which was that, the body's intelligence runs very deep. We don't have to do anything to make our heart beat. We don't have to do anything to heal a cut, apart from just get the conditions right to keep it clean. And yet we think we have so much control over things. But in essence, the majority of what happens in the body, and from that, the emotions and the mind, is happening kind of automatically, and it's something we can trust. And I think this theme for me of trusting the body, not trying to control the body too much, but trusting that it knew what it was doing. That was a big part of it. And so from that, I kind of thought, well, okay, if the body does know what it's doing, it knows how to stay well, what are the kind of things that we can do that will actually encourage that process? Because, I am a conscious agent. There is a Phil in here somewhere, God knows where, that's observing all this and saying, yes, now I have a drink of water and now I'll go and do some exercise. There is a conscious agent there, but sometimes it seems that can get in the way. Because it'll go, I'll do another hour's work and I won't have a drink of water.
Right, exactly.
So the willpower can actually get kind of interfere with those natural patterns. And so I thought, well, there must be things that we can do to actually really encourage that kind of natural process of becoming well. Okay. And they could be to do with movement. They could be to do with understanding and being introspective about your thoughts, about your kind of the patterns of your thinking, and also about how you react emotionally to the world. And just starting to notice, basically noticing, like in meditation, what is it that I do every day on a habit basis, and not going, that's terrible, I need to be doing something different. But just going, that's interesting, I'm doing that again. And I'm doing that again, and I'm doing that. So rather than not becoming obsessive about it, but just starting to have an awareness of all the things that I do. And starting to notice which of those things were kind of obstacles, if you like, obstacles to that process of becoming well, which could be like not going to bed early enough, or drinking too much alcohol, or whatever, all the things that actually got in the way of that natural process of wellness. And then what the things were, the things I could do to actually aid that process, the good habits I could get into. So it was a very sort of a binary idea. But the feeling in me was that there is always this kind of, not wanting to get too esoteric. And I'm not a religious person, but I do have a sense that, we overestimate our position in this universe hugely. That the forces at play here are way beyond anything that individuals can control. And yet we are part of that. So let's not go, oh, I'm in the worm, it's like,
right.
I'm a node in a network of cosmic consciousness,
Right.
whatever that means. But it's like, I am important, but I'm not the center of the universe.
Right.
And if these forces that are at work, which, shape evolution and turn the planets and guide the stars, it's like, that must also be going on in me,
Right.
It's kind of all one, even though it's separate.
Yes.
And so I was lying on a sun lounger in Morocco at some point in about 2007, and I was thinking about this and the book, and this title just actually literally fell out of the sky. It was like, Unraveling, letting go, getting well. And I'm like, what's that? I'll just write that down somewhere.
Yeah.
And it's like people say that shit and people go, no, they just make that up. That actually happened. It was so weird.
That's so crazy. Yeah.
And thinking about it, I started to get this image of tension, of the way we tie ourselves in knots, both mentally, emotionally, and physically. And how, back to what we were talking about earlier, recruiting tension that really doesn't serve us.
Right.
But it's part of, some of it is external. It's like circumstances screw us up. But we screw ourselves up as well. And sometimes we can't do anything about circumstances. The only agency we've got is how much we hang on. And that kind of hanging on and that tension, there's somewhere in me that I can actually create a change in that just by going.
Yeah, exactly.
And that is it. And that is all it is. It's like, in the moment, am I doing this? Or am I doing
this? Yeah.
Because sometimes I need to do this because I need to lift the bloody 24-kilo kettlebell above me head.
Right, yeah.
10 minutes. Never do. Terrible thing.
Yeah.
But most of the time, I don't need to be like that.
Right. Well, what you said there, I thought was so fascinating is just noticing it. Like just the notice of it is so important. And
yeah.
I think in our culture, we're so quick to fix the problems as soon as we see them. We don't like those open loops. We're trying to find anything to close that loop as quick as possible. But like, as you were talking about unraveling, I'm thinking like a big ball of knot. It's like, oh, well, if you want to get it out, if you start just pulling at it, you're just going to make the knots tighter instead of actually sit back, just look at what's going on and just noticing. And that's actually a great meditative practice of people think like, oh, I want to clear my mind. It's like, well, your mind's reactive. It's going to be moving a lot. But if you just catch the thought, oh, I drifted. Okay. Come back to it. Just the noticing of it is going to find it. And just like you said, like sometimes you might be in a hammock in Morocco and all of a sudden the thing just pops up and that's it. If you force that out, then you're going to put yourself in a lot of issues where if you just kind of let it be, that might be the answer you're looking for.
Because if you let it be, then it becomes subject to natural forces. If you let something be, it doesn't just sit there. It's still traveling at 96,000 miles. It's like we're all in movement all the time. We're all subject to all sorts of stuff. Yeah. So it's about just taking a bit of the willpower out of it. Just put it down occasionally. Give it, the power's in the pause. There's a place where it can just do its thing. Then you can pick it up again, have another look at it. But does this, these ideas sit up scientifically? Possibly. There's, the idea of homeostasis. It's like the body is always bringing itself back to
balance.
Certain places. And there's this thing about the balance between the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. Like most of the time, we really, for our health, most of the time we should be in parasympathetic mode, rest and digest. And then if we want to go into sympathetic arousal, we can do it from that place.
Yep.
But if I'm here all the time, not only can I not get into rest and digest, but if I want to do something, I can't even do it because I'm already doing it.
Right.
So I need this contrast again between this and this.
Yes.
And this and this. And up and down and swing.
Right.
So there's something about rhythmic movement. And it's like, kettlebell swingers are not the only people who do rhythmic movement. We've got dance. We've got, all sorts of stuff that we do that takes us from here to there and back again.
Yeah.
And it's like that has to, in some way, dig into some very natural processes of actually working between two poles,
Right.
Parasympathetic, sympathetic, night, day, yin, yang, blah, de blah.
Right. Well, and it's interesting too, when you see somebody who's really mastered this or really an expert at, lifting a kettlebell, seeing somebody who is really honed in, a champion in kettlebell sport, or a dancer, it looks so effortless of what they're doing.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah. It's just, it's like practice, but they just make it look so flow because they found that harmony of both of them together.
There's a thing at kettlebell sport competitions where you're looking for the people who are really going to put the big scores in, and it's like they make fast look slow.
Yes.
And it's like you're going, how is that counter going up at that rate?
Crazy. Yeah.
Because they're just looking like they're moving in slow motion. It's because they've got a beautiful partnership between their own body, gravity, and the weight of the bell.
Mm. And
like Maria's keen to point out that the bell's always in charge because it's heavy and it'll kill you if it goes in the wrong place. So respect the bell, respect gravity, follow the bell, don't try and overpower it, and you'll start to look slow even when you're moving fast.
Yeah. Oh, that's I think a perfect line to close this out. Phil, I really enjoy talking to you. I really love the message that you have about, everything in this world, especially with balance, with the stability. This was just an awesome conversation. I feel like we just got started. So
yeah, we didn't kind of talk about the things you were going to ask me.
That's how a podcast goes. It's like you have 5 things to talk about and you get to 2 because you get rolling. But no, this is great. I really appreciate you taking the time. I think this is really fantastic stuff. So if people want to check out your book, check out more of your content, what's the best place that we can direct them?
I float about on Facebook mainly, Phil Greenfield. The book site is www.theunravelingbook.com with 2 L's.
Perfect.
And yeah, I don't really, I'm like Maria, I don't do much else.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. Yeah, no,
we'll put it.
We'll put it right in the show notes. So no, this is great. Phil, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Nice to meet you. Keep spreading it.
Absolutely. Listeners, thank you so much. I'll catch you on the next one. Bye, guys.
Take care. Bye now.
Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you found some great value here. And if you like this episode, please drop a comment and leave us a 5-star rating and review. It does more to build the show than you can imagine. And do not forget to check out and join the Strength Connection Facebook group. In this group, I share the biggest takeaways and lessons from these amazing conversations, as well as training and strength tips for pursuing mastery and fulfillment in life. This group is filled with individuals looking to take full control over their strength, and it's the perfect space to explore new ideas and to share your journey. And you'll also get exclusive access to these Strength Connection Mastery Seminars. It's a deep dive into the physical, mental, and spiritual training that you can begin using immediately. So do not wait, go now. Seriously, go. All right, much love to you. Thank you so much, and I'll catch you on the next one.